Hello, friends. This is Manoj Baptani. I welcome you all on behalf of the Edupedia world. It's been an exciting day outside, and I'm sure that you guys are living your life to the fullest. You are living like anything. You're completing all your goals, all your vision, each and every aspect that you have fulfilled for your life. You are rejoicing that moment. You are rejuvenating yourself. Perfect, guys. Let's keep that enthusiasm, your excitement alive. This is the third video presentation in which I'm going to discuss with you some of the relevant aspects with relation to special audits. By now we have already covered two of our presentations. So are you guys like revising your topics time and again? Perfect, guys. You're actually held our head high with these things. Perfect. Keep making us proud by revising the topics time and again because that's one of the most crucial aspect which needs to be done. So fasten up your seatbelts. We are about to take off with the third presentation with relation to special audits with the first topic, and that will be audit report and inspection in case of mutual funds. This question was asked in CA final examination for May 2009. So by mutual fund, I simply mean that whenever in your life you get a chance to have the audit done for any of the mutual fund based company. So what all aspects are you going to keep in your mind wherever you start auditing any of the mutual fund company? What is the basic thing which needs to be done as far as their audit report is concerned? How to go about making inspection from time to time. So this is all about this particular case. So this question was asked in CA final examination for May 2009. So if I'll talk about the audit report. So guys, in the audit report in case of mutual funds basically like comprise of the few matters. Number one will be obtaining all information. So whether the auditor, that means you, whether you have obtained all information which to the best of your knowledge and belief were necessary for the purpose of audit or not. So whether you have obtained all information. Number two, fair and true and fair view, basically fair and true view of the scheme. So whether the balance sheet and revenue account gives a fair and true view of the scheme, state of affairs, and surplus or deficit in the fund for the accounting period to which balance sheet and revenue account actually relates. So whether the particular scheme provides true and fair view or not. Number two. Number three, whether the statement of account has been prepared in accordance with the accounting principles and standards specified in the act or not. So that should be the third thing. So in any case, in any of the audit report for in case of mutual funds, these are the three aspects which need to be comprised of in this case. So whether the auditor has obtained all the information, whether that particular balance sheet and revenue account provides or give a fair and true view of the scheme or not, and whether the statement of accounts have been prepared in accordance with the accounting principles and standards specified or not. So these three things need to be covered in any of the audit report. If I'll talk about now inspection. So moving on to inspection, SEBI, that is Securities Exchange Board of India, has the power to appoint the inspecting officers to undertake the inspection of the books of accounts, records, documents and infrastructure system procedures. Number one, they have got the right to appoint any of the person, inspecting officer, to undertake the inspection of books, accounts or any of the stuff in that company. Number two, they can appoint a person, that is inspecting officer, to investigate the affairs of the mutual fund, the trustees, the asset management company. So they have that kind of power. So what all will be done by that inspecting officer if in case he gets appointed? He'll be like, first of all, checking out whether the company is like maintaining the proper books of accounts or not, to ensure that the books of accounts are being maintained by the mutual fund, the trustees and asset management company in the manner which is specified in the schedule regulations. So that has to be taken care of. Number two, to ascertain whether the Securities Exchange Board of India Act and regulations are being complied with by the management, the trustees and asset management company or not. If in case that's not being maintained and the same have been like not complied with, so in that particular case you need to inform SEBI. Number three will be the ascertaining whether the systems, procedures, safeguards followed by the mutual fund are adequate or not. You as an auditor, you were checking out some of the things and you find out some kind of ambiguity. Okay, so you just suggested that sir, you can implement this particular stuff over here as well, because your procedures are just not adequate. So the system, procedure and safeguard followed by the management are adequate or not. Number 4 will be to ascertain whether any provisions of SEBI Act rules and regulations have been violated or not. Ascertain the violation of the provisions of the Act if the same have been done. Next will be to investigate into the complaints received by the investors, from the investors, or any of the matter which have a bearing on the activities of the mutual fund, trustees and the AMC. So you need to investigate into the kind of complaints that you are receiving from the investors. That is again required to be done. Next thing will be to evaluate the efficacy of the utilization of resources, which is again required to be done. And lastly, to ensure whether the affairs of mutual fund, the trustees, the asset management company are being conducted in a manner which is in the best interest of investors and securities market or not. So, if in case any of the inspector officer is being appointed by SEBI, then he or she maybe have to check about all these things: maintenance of books of accounts, compliance of regulations, adequacy of systems, procedure followed up, ascertain the violation of any of the provisions of the Act, to evaluate the efficacy of the utilization of resources, to investigate into the complaints received from investors, and to finally ensure the conduct of affairs in the interest of investors. All these things need to be taken care of. This question was asked in CA final examination for May 2009, and I hope that you guys got the complete clarity about the same thing. Perfect, guys. Let's move to the next topic, and that will be about the accounting policies and standards which are applicable to mutual funds. So guys, as far as this particular concern is related, so let's begin with investments first of all. So number one thing is cost. So the cost of investment which is being acquired or purchased by the mutual fund company should include the brokerage, stamp charges and any other charges which are customarily included in the broker's brought note. So that has to be taken care of. Cost will include the brokerage and stamp charges. Next, for privately placed debt instruments, front end discount. Usually there is some kind of front end discount which is being provided to them, because these are the persons who are actually taking care of all taking and availing the facility of taking up these debt instruments privately placed. So the company usually offers them some front end discount because they are taking something in bulk. So front end discount which is offered should be reduced from the cost. So that is something which is likely to be done. And in order to determine the holding cost of investment and the gain and loss of the sale of investments, the average cost method should be followed. So that is all relating to cost. Next will be the valuation. So investment should be mark to market. If you have read my sessions for SFM, so there I have discussed about this thing, that investment should be mark to market each day, and the carried one should be in the balance sheet at the market value. Next, about the provision. So provision should be made for each and every kind of unrealized gain which is arising out of appreciation on investments. Such gain cannot be distributed as dividend income. So this is about valuation. After valuation will come the date of transfers. So transactions for purchase and sale of investments should be recognized in the accounts on the trade date. I repeat, they should be recognized only on trade date and not settlement date. Remember, trade date is something else, settlement date is something else. Settlement usually takes place in T+2 cycle, transaction plus 2 days, 2 working days. So transaction of purchase and sale of investment should be recognized in the books of accounts on trade date, and the same date it has been done. To ensure proper recording of all the investments traded during a financial year and their reflection on the financial statements. If the transaction takes place outside the stock market, that is like private placement, the transaction should be recorded for a purchase. In that case, the date on which scheme obtains an enforceable obligation to pay the price. The person who has availed the facility, he comes into the picture and he comes into the liability as soon as the scheme gets an enforceable obligation to pay the price. So that has to be taken care of. That is with purchase. And as far as the sale is concerned, then the scheme obtains some enforceable right to collect the proceeds. For the one, it has to be for the payment of proceeds. For the another person, that has to be always the collection of the proceeds of sale or obligation to deliver the instruments sold. So that is about the date of transfer. If I'll talk about the bonus and the right issue, So bonus issue should be recognized only when the original shares on which the bonus entitlement accrues are traded on the stock exchange on the ex bonus basis. Whereas in case of right issue, right estimates should be recognized only when the original shares on which the right entitlement accrues are traded on the stock exchange, that is on ex right basis. So one is having ex bonus basis, another one is having ex right basis. And then there will be units of mutual fund. So in case of sale and repurchase of units of an open-ended scheme, profit and loss should be credited and debited to reserve and surplus. If any, should be debited to reserves. The face value and the unit should be credited to capital account. So by open-ending scheme, I simply mean the kind of scheme wherein the security for the bond or basically the mutual fund, okay, it usually gets traded each day. So it's an open-ending scheme. So it doesn't have any kind of expiry date. So you can go about and get involved in it at any moment of time. The same gets into running mode that way. So it has to be taken care of in this sense. So this is the open-ended scheme. So units of mutual fund in case of open-ended scheme. Next will be the equalization account for open-ended scheme. So if units are sold, an appropriate part of sale proceeds should be credited to equalization account. When the units are repurchased, an appropriate amount should be debited to equalization account. So it has to be done in both ways. Net balance in the account should be credited and debited to the revenue account. However, such credit or debit should not increase or decrease the net income of the fund, as it is only and merely an adjustment to the distributable surplus, and hence it should not be reflected in the revenue account only after the net income of the fund is determined. That is about the equalization account. And lastly, about the close-end scheme. So for close-ended scheme, providing an option for early redemption and repurchase of their own units, the par value of the unit should be transferred to capital account, and the difference between the purchase price and the par value, if positive, should be transferred to reserves. Proportionate part of unamortized initial issue expenses should be transferred to the reserve so that the balance carry forward on that account is proportional to the number of units remaining outstanding. So that is something which requires to be done in case of close-ended scheme. So this was all about investments. Now moving on to income recognition. There are more or less like four major aspects. One is dividend income, then interest income, then non-receipt of income and interest, and finally underwriting commission. So number one will be the dividend income. So dividend income is basically earned by a scheme that should be recognized, wherein the share is quoted on ex-dividend basis and not on the date of declaration of dividend. In respect of the investments that are not quoted on the stock exchange, dividend income must be recognized on the date of declaration. So that is about the dividend income and its income recognition. It should be, if in case the same is being recognized on the stock exchange, then it should be recognized on the date on which the share is quoted, that is on ex-dividend basis, and not on the date of declaration. But if in case it's on the investment that are not quoted in stock exchange, dividend income must be recognized on the date of declaration. So that is about the income recognition of date of declaration. Next will be the interest income. For all the interest bearing investments, the income must be recognized on accrual basis. When such investments are purchased, interest paid for the term period from the last interest date till the last date of purchase should be debited to interest recoverable account. Also, the interest received at the time of sale of the period from last interest date till the date of sale must be credited to the interest recoverable account. So it's pretty much simple. You need to understand this one fact, that for all the interest bearing investments, income must be recognized on accrual basis. Next, it's about non-receipt of income or interest. So guys, where the accrued income receivable on investment has not been received for a period of 12 months beyond the due date, then in that case you need to prepare the sufficient provision, and it should be made by debiting the revenue account for the income so accrued. Also in that particular case, no further accrual of income should be made in respect of any of such investment. So that should be done if in case you don't have, you don't receive any of the income or interest in that case. So no further accrual of income should be made, because you just don't receive the last one. So how can you make accrual of the current one? You just need not make that further accrual of income. And finally, the underwriting commission. So they should be recognized as revenue only when there is no devolvement on the scheme. So if there is some certain kind of devolvement on the scheme, the entire underwriting commission received should be reduced from the cost of investment. So that is about underwriting commission. So you need to reduce all the cost, all that particular thing from the cost of investment if in case there is some devolvement of the scheme. So if there is no devolvement scheme, so you can recognize the same as the revenue. So perfect guys, that's all about the income recognition as far as dividend income, interest income, non-receipt of income and interest, and finally underwriting commission is concerned. So I hope that you guys got the complete clarity with respect to all the examples that I illustrated to you in this particular case as well. Perfect guys. Now the last topic of this presentation, wherein I'll be discussing with you something related to the maintenance of books of accounts by depository. So what all are the books of accounts or records or documents that are required to be maintained by depository for larger time span? So what all are they? So guys, under this particular Securities Exchange Board of India regulations, the depositories are required to maintain some of the records and documents for a minimum period of 5 years. So number one will be the records of securities which were dematerialized and rematerialized. Okay, so that needs to be done. So one which were converted from share certificates from physical one into the share into the demat form, or the ones which were converted from demat form into the actual share certificates physical form. So you need to maintain the record for all those securities. Number two, names of the transferor, transferee, and date of transfer of securities. So who were the persons who did transfer their securities, and the person who were the actual person who got those securities, so transferee. And then there is a register and index of the beneficial owners. So who all are going to get the beneficial, be termed as a beneficial owners for all these adjustments. Next will be the records of instructions, which is received from and sent to participants, issuers, agents, and beneficial owners. So all these records of transactions need to be maintained. Next will be records of approval, notice, entry, cancellation, pledge, hypothecation. So anything, the detail of all those participants needs to be done. Next will be the detail of securities which are declared to be eligible for dematerialization in any of this depository. There might be a chances that a company was still working under the scheme of or regime of physical certificates, but now it got an opportunity to get be eligible to be transferred into the form of dematerialization. So that needs to be covered under this as well. So details of securities which were declared to be eligible for dematerialization in any of the depository. And lastly, any kind of other records which is being specified by SEBI for carrying on the activities as a depository. So you need to take care of all these records, be it record of securities dematerialized, rematerialized, name of the transferor, transferee, date of transfer, register and index of beneficial owners, records of instructions, records of approval, notice, entry, cancellation, detail of participants, detail of securities declared to be eligible for dematerialization, and all such other records which are specified by SEBI. I hope you guys got the complete clarity as to what kind of documents or records that need to be maintained in any of the mutual fund business. And please note that the depository should intimate SEBI the place where the records and documents are maintained. That will be covered under law, but I must tell you something over here as well. So if in case the depository maintains the records electronically, then it should ensure that the integrity of the automated data processing system is maintained at all the times, and necessary precautions are being taken to ensure that the records are not lost, destroyed or tampered with. And in case of event of loss or destruction, such sufficient backup of records is available at all the times at a different place. So that needs to be taken care of. And if I'll talk about the inspection part, so inspection of these 5 elements, books of accounts, complaints, compliance, evaluation of system adequacy and conduct needs to be done. So guys, believe me, SEBI is empowered. SEBI is utmostly empowered to appoint any of the inspecting officers to inspect the books of accounts, records, documents, infrastructure, any activities, and anything to investigate the affairs of depository, a participant, a beneficial owner with the issuer or his agent, and that includes checking up for the books of accounts first of all. So, to ensure that the books of accounts are being maintained properly by the depository, participant, issuer, and any of the agents in this particular compliance and regulations. Number two, that is with complaints. So they can access and appoint any of the inspecting officer to look into the complaints which are received from depositories, participants, issuers agents, beneficial owners. So inspecting officer is the one who is going to look into any of the complaints. Next will be the compliance. So to ascertain whether the provisions of the act, regulations, bylaws, agreements are complied with the depository, participant, beneficial owners or not. So inspecting officers can evaluate and ascertain the compliance as well. And again, the inspecting officer can be appointed to evaluate the system adequacy, to ascertain whether the system's procedure safeguards are being followed up by depository, participants, borrowers, all these persons, and these evaluation steps are adequate or not. And finally, the conduct. So to ensure that the affairs of depository, participant, beneficial owner are being conducted in a manner which is the best interest of investors and securities market or not. So all these things can be inspected by the inspecting officer at any point of time, be it books of accounts, be it complaints, be it compliances, be it evaluation of system adequacy, and be it conduct. They have the power to appoint any of such inspector officers to conduct the inspection of any of these things. So I hope you guys got the complete clarity with respect to the kind of documents and records that need to be maintained, and finally the kind of inspection that can be done. Perfect guys, just do revise your topics because that's one of the relevant thing which needs to be done and covered up with each kind of video that you're watching. I'll be concluding my video with a dose of motivation, and that will be: get a good idea and stay with it, dog it and stay with it until it's done right. Walt Disney quoted this perfect quote. Thank you. On behalf of the Edupedia world, keep interacting via questions, queries, and YouTube comment boxes. We love to solve out your queries and grievances whenever you wish to. So stay connected. That will help us in understanding your needs way better. Till then, take care of yourself and your family. Keep your spirits high and do revise your topics time and again. Love you. God bless you. Take care. Bye. See you.